everybody, happy Thursday, welcome to my channel. I hope everybody's been having a great week and everybody's day thus far has been great. Today we'll discuss Russia and Russian defense budget and the new changes that were proposed this week and additional expansions. This week has been interesting for Russia because 6 GRU officers have been indicted by US pertaining to cyber operations, meaning interfering in the world affairs, and as you know, elections, cyber espionage, etc. There's multiple factors on that. I will leave a link to that release as well. Additionally, I would like to say that Russia has been in news a lot with a lot of different situations in the past few months, from poisoning of Navalny, which it is not proven that Kremlin actually did. Navalny is a different conversation within itself, and there's a lot of different theories around him and who he actually is. I would point out that he is a dishonest person, however, he does not deserve to be poisoned, but this is not the scope of this video and this is not what I plan to discuss today. So the changes. Russian Ministry of Finance announced the proposed changes this week pertaining to the defense budget. The new proposals expected to save 20 billion rubles, which is close to 257,400 million US dollars basically, if you convert that. Nevertheless, when you hear the word changes and proposals in Russia, it usually means that they're going to pass, because they do not make it the news unless the Kremlin already has approved it, looked at it, and it just basically reviews just the final step, because otherwise they would have never made it to the news. That's very simple, and nobody within the Ministry of Finance would be proposing such changes without having backup and already knowing that they're going to happen. So basically happens, this is new changes that are going to take place, etc. There might be additional tweaking added, of course, because there is usually, could be part 1, part 2, but nevertheless, they're going to pass. So let's discuss what the changes are, and then I'll give my analysis of what I think was happening with additional information. So the proposals include reduction of the number of troops. And the reason behind it's not because Russia is trying to save resources and decides to change the army to have less personnel. What is happening in Russia and everywhere around the world, people are actually relying heavily on technology now. There's a lot of drones technology involved. There's also a lot of AI involved. There's also super suits involved and robotics involved. So this is one of the reasons why this is happening. I don't think Russia is actually going to have less power. It just changes in trajectory of war is changing, and including, latest, I think people propose a new war will be in space, technically speaking. Their proposal to start developing atomic energy and atomic technology on the moon. There's a lot of proposals happening to have on the moon right now, but nevertheless, for the scope of this budget, so the cuts are basically on that. That's one. The increase of length of service. This is going to be an interesting one, because the increase of length of service now is going to be 25 years. Before, and this is how Russian system works, when young men turns 18, they join an army for a year. And they're taught how to use weapons, etc., and be ready if needed. This came from the Soviet days. In Soviet days it was 2 years. After Soviet Union collapsed, etc., and eventually right after, it was changed to 1 year service. Now, and the enlistment I'm talking about is somebody who's enrolling in military as a career. So the enlistment now allows people up to 35 of age to join the military. That would have to change to 25 years, and I'll tell you why. Because now the proposed changes of 25 years also include, if someone decides to leave military early on such contract, they would have to repay the training and equipment that they got during their service. And that would mean, so in other words, once you join military in Russia, you cannot get out. It's not like in Canada or US, you can enlist for like 4 or 10 years. It's different terms. I'm not super familiar with like military enlistments per se in the West, but nevertheless. So this is the changes that Russia are bringing. Also the reform of law enforcement, which would mean one single organization. What that actually means about law enforcement. We're not talking about regular, traffic cops and all that. We're talking about correction services and more hierarchical changes. What it would actually mean? It would actually facilitate for the Kremlin to have easier situations. For example, if everywhere else you get arrested based on crime committed, etc. In Russia, if you're politically opposite viewing, for example, Sergei Frugal, he was part of LDPR party. He was taken off his post because he did not agree with United Russia Party and he was doing too much of good for the region. He was removed under trumped-up charges that he tried to facilitate murders from almost 15 years ago, and is close to the limitation period, so that's why they put that time span on it. And now he's in Moscow charged. Obviously, there's a new individual in his position from the same party, LDPR, nevertheless, but LDPR leader Zhirinovsky, even though he's condemning it, he's not doing much for his party member anyways, but that's what useful opposition in Russia means. That means they do exist, they get their piece of a pie, but really, they only say little by little and just show some type of diligence that they're doing something. So that's that. So that would mean another things like there's a few deaths this summer. One of them was in custody, and I've done an article pertaining to that. I will leave the link to that article underneath my video as well, and I also have an article portraying these cuts with more detail. I'll leave a link to that as well underneath my video. So nevertheless, there's also political arrest, and some people suspiciously die or commit suicide in Russian prisons, nevertheless. So now with amalgamated organizations, it makes it so much more convenient if you wanted to do anything of that nature. And of course, in Russia, it's very common to have happened in the first place. So this would actually aid the government in having more political prisoners or political charges, or more politically motivated charges, I should put it, in order to facilitate Russian needs. So also, what does it mean? Average Russian army personnel gets 50,000 rubles per month, which is about $641 US. Yes, it's not much, but for Russia, if you don't live in Moscow or St. Petersburg, and of course I said average because there's also higher ranks, there's also additional perks with Russian military, of course, so that amount is higher. So since Putin came to power, military personnel did get a raise and they are getting more money. So that's one of the reasons as far as the military is concerned. So the budget cut will be about, if you look at it on a full scale, it's 10% of the budget spent on personnel, etc. that's proposed. And with amalgamation, there's some vacancies also. That would mean that right now the commander of Russian army, obviously Putin, but as far as Minister of Defense, Shoigu, he would actually gain more powers with such amalgamations, because I can't see him being replaced. He's been with Putin for a long time. So that would actually make him very happy to get additional power. That would be that. Also, additionally, but this is a separate document, came out this week as well. However, I'm reading between the lines on that one. There's an expansion of Russian technology. And of course, as far as defense technology is concerned, Russia has been showcasing a lot of new equipment. They have been testing a lot of new equipment, nuclear weapons and everything. So there's also research budgets. There's grants which are given to corporations like Roscosmos, which is obviously space corporation in Russia, Rosatoms, that's involved in a lot of atomic energy, etc., including ships and everything like that, especially in Arctic, as far as Russian defense is concerned. But there's also grants for nuclear research. And nuclear research in defense usually means nuclear weapons. Let's be very realistic. So that means Russia is going to be doing more nuclear weapons. It's not a surprise, because earlier this year they also said they're bringing back the nuclear train as well, which was actually taken out of rotation in 1987 in the Soviet Union. Now it's brought back. I can post a link to this article I have done earlier this summer pertaining that nuclear train brought back in actual design, which obviously some parts are classified, but nevertheless it's a ghost train and it has its own capabilities and what it's capable of actually doing. Nevertheless, so this is that. Then there's also expansion of budget in cyber. In one way, it reads that it is a protection offers Russian citizens and Russian sovereignty. There's also a lot of discussion about Russian intranet, like China has Great Firewall of China, pertaining having such equipment and also having more tight security of what's available on intranet and Russian internet when you do searches, etc. Russian servers, storage on Russian servers. There's a lot of been discussions about that. But nevertheless, when I'm reading this cyber expansion, that would mean that Russia is focusing more on cyber operations. Which interesting timing of it, because this week, like I said, the 6 GRU officers have been indicted by US pertaining to interference in cyber and, like I said, basically cyber warfare, to read it pretty plainly and simply. So this expansion would mean that Russia is going to be spending more funds and more operation pertaining to cyber espionage. And that would mean there has to be more threats and more security warnings in place for the West, because it is a dangerous trajectory. Russia has been accused also of meddling in 2016 elections. US elections are happening on November 3rd, which is less than 2 weeks away in US, and this is a big election because there's a lot riding on it. I'm not going to get in on this video in American politics, of course, especially with a tumultuous year of coronavirus pandemic around the world and a lot of other factors involved, economy factors and everything else, and the future of US politics and even geopolitics, because US is one of the trendsetters and one of the strongest countries in the world. Well, it's number one basically right now. Can't change that, and that's a big thing to be watching. But nevertheless, so that means cyber operations expansion for 2021. That would mean that Russia will be working on more. They already developed. There's already Technopolis Center that actually seems to be heavily involved in that, and this is from research and Russian pure government side. We're not even talking about St. Petersburg troll factory and Prigozhin that have been involved or linked to that as far as actual Russian trolls working. We're actually talking about developing such technology, and I'm sure as far as cyber espionage, cyber tracking, and new technologies of this nature. So given all this video and all the information provided, like I said, I will leave a link with additional information on this. What does everybody think? Please click like. Please subscribe to my channel. You can also read my articles under Kristina Kitova at communalnews.com. And I hope everybody has a great day. And thank you for watching. Thanks again, everybody.